Most riders over 60 believe their experience is their greatest safety asset. Decades of miles, thousands of hours. And they're right, up to a point. After 60, your body starts working against that experience in ways you won't feel coming. In one study tracking 7 years of emergency department data, injuries among riders over 60 jumped 247%. Not because they rode more, because they kept riding the same way. In this video, you will know exactly what is changing and the 7 adaptations that buy back every one of those years. I have seen bikes come into the shop in perfect condition. Fresh oil, good tires, chain adjusted. The owner had 30 years in the saddle. And somewhere in the conversation, it comes out, the bike weighs 620 pounds. The rider has not done a training course since 1994, and they are still riding like nothing has changed. The bike was not the problem. The rider's body had changed, and nobody had told them what to do about it. That is not a criticism. That is a gap in information. Here's exactly what is happening, and what you can do to stay ahead of it. The single biggest adaptation most older riders never make: the bike. Not because they can't afford a new one, not because they don't know better bikes exist, because the bike they're on carries 20 years of memories, and they've convinced themselves it still fits. It doesn't. A 620-pound touring bike that felt planted and manageable at 45 is a different machine at 65. Your grip strength has dropped. Your ability to catch a tip over at a standstill has changed. The low-speed maneuvers, like parking lots, tight turns, and slow traffic, are exactly where older riders go down. And a heavy bike with a high seat height turns every one of those moments into a test you didn't sign up for. Here's what to look for in a bike that works with your body instead of against it. Consider a bike light enough for you to confidently balance, push, and recover at low speed. For many riders, that means well under 485 pounds. A seat height where you can get at least 1 foot down confidently, even if it's not completely flat on the ground. Upright ergonomics that don't load your wrists and shoulders. Smooth, predictable power delivery, not a throttle that punishes you for being half a second slow. You don't have to ride a small bike, you have to ride the right bike. There's a difference. And making that call early is the adaptation that makes every other one on this list easier. Once you have the right bike, the next thing most riders ignore is how they're actually sitting on it. Factory handlebar position is a compromise, and it may not fit your body, your flexibility, or your riding posture. On sport, and sport touring bikes especially, stock bars often sit too low and too far forward. That means you're leaning into the bike, loading your wrists, tensing your shoulders, and compressing your lower back from the first minute of every ride. Here's why that matters beyond comfort. Fatigue is not just uncomfortable. Fatigue is dangerous. A rider who is physically tired makes slower decisions, misses hazards sooner, and reacts later. Back pain and fatigue can reduce your attention and make it easier to miss a hazard later in the ride. It's not dramatic. It just quietly kills your attention at exactly the wrong moment. The fix is straightforward and cheap. Handlebar risers. On many bikes, properly fitted risers, typically about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of added height, move the controls closer, reduce wrist load, and improve shoulder and neck comfort. Most riders who fit them say they wish they had done it years earlier. Better posture means less fatigue. Less fatigue means sharper attention. Sharper attention keeps you alive. This one, almost nobody talks about, and it quietly makes your bike harder to ride every single day. Most riders never touch their suspension after they buy the bike. Factory settings are set for a generic rider at a generic weight with a generic riding style. That rider is not you. And at 60 plus, the gap between factory settings and what your body actually needs has likely grown wider than you think. Here's what wrong suspension does to an older rider specifically. If your sag is off, meaning the suspension is not set correctly for your weight, the bike will not sit properly in its travel range, affecting stability and handling. Too much preload and the bike feels nervous, unstable, and difficult to control through corners. Too little and it wallows, sits sluggish, and bottoms out when you need it most. Either way, you are fighting the bike instead of riding it. There is also a confidence issue at stops. If preload or sag leaves the bike sitting too tall for you, you may be stretching for the ground at every red light. That moment of instability, 1 foot down, bike slightly off balance, can increase tip over risk, especially on a heavy bike. Get your suspension set up properly for your current weight and riding style. It costs very little at a shop. What it buys back is a bike that feels planted, predictable, and confidence-inspiring at exactly the moments you need it most. If this is the kind of information you want before it costs you, subscribe. I cover this every week, and I do not hold back. Here is where the conversation shifts from comfort to survival. Your reaction time is slowing down. Not because you're careless, not because you're a worse rider, because that's what biology does after 60. Research consistently shows reaction time slows gradually from early adulthood, and by 60, that difference is measurable and real. At highway speed, even a small delay is distance. And in a panic braking situation, the difference between reacting in time and not reacting in time can come down to fractions of a second. Here's the thing. ABS reacts extremely quickly when it detects wheel lock. When ABS detects incipient wheel lock, it modulates brake pressure far faster and more consistently than any rider can. No panic, no hesitation, no freeze. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety found that ABS reduces fatal crash likelihood by 37%. Studies using in-depth crash data have estimated that motorcycle ABS could help prevent roughly 1/4 of injury crashes. Those numbers exist because ABS is doing something your nervous system simply cannot match under pressure. Traction control works the same principle in the other direction. If the rear wheel starts to spin under power, traction control can reduce torque very quickly, often before the rider can react. That intervention window, between the moment something goes wrong and the moment you respond, gets wider every year after 60. Traction control fills that gap. If your current bike doesn't have ABS, that is not a minor missing feature. That is a measurable, documented gap in your safety net. Modern ABS, and where appropriate, traction control, can add a meaningful safety margin, especially as reaction time and physical recovery margins decline. This technology exists specifically for situations where human reflexes aren't fast enough. After 60, that description fits every rider on the road. This one catches experienced tourers completely off guard. It is not about how much you carry, it is about where you put it. Most riders loading up for a long trip think about capacity. Will everything fit? Whether the bags are waterproof? How quickly they can access their gear at a rest stop? What almost nobody thinks about is what that loading pattern is doing to the handling of the bike, and how much harder it makes riding for a body that is already working harder than it was 10 years ago. Here's the problem. A heavy top box loaded above seat height raises the center of gravity of the entire bike. A higher or rearward load can make a motorcycle feel more top-heavy and harder to manage at low speed in parking lots, U-turns, and slow traffic. Exactly the situations where older riders are already most vulnerable. You're not just carrying extra weight, you are actively making the bike harder to control at the worst possible moments. The fix is simple, but it requires changing a habit. Heavy items belong low. Put tools, liquids, and spare parts at the bottom of the panniers, close to axle height. Light items go high. A noticeable left-right pannier imbalance can make the bike feel uneven and force you to compensate over a long day. By hour 6, that compensation is fatigue you did not know you were carrying. Panniers keep weight low and centered. A top box overloaded with heavy gear does the opposite. That distinction matters more at 65 than it did at 45 because your margin for fighting a badly balanced bike has narrowed. Pack smart. Keep weight low. Let the bike do what it was designed to do instead of fighting a problem you created before you left the driveway. Everything we've covered so far reduces the likelihood of going down. This one is about what happens if you do. Older riders are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized after a crash than younger riders. Not 3 times more likely to crash, 3 times more likely to end up in a hospital bed when they do. The reason is straightforward, and nobody likes to say it out loud. Bone density decreases with age. A crash that a younger rider might recover from relatively quickly can produce much more serious injuries in an older rider. That gap doesn't close with experience. It widens every year. The airbag vest changes that equation. In MotoGP, permanent riders have been required to wear functional airbag systems since 2018. Not because they lack skill, because the physics of a crash at speed are beyond what any human body handles well, regardless of ability. The technology then trickled down to road riders, and right now, you can buy motorcycle airbag systems that deploy in under 25 milliseconds, faster than any human reflex, covering your chest, back, and shoulders the moment the system detects a crash event. 25 milliseconds is faster than conscious reaction. To put that deployment speed in context, in many crash scenarios, an electronic airbag can deploy before a rider could consciously react. That is not marketing language. That is the physics of how fast these systems operate versus how fast the human nervous system processes an emergency. Fractures are among the most common motorcycle crash injuries, and older riders are especially vulnerable to serious chest, rib, and internal injuries. The airbag vest is designed to absorb and distribute impact forces over the body areas it covers. It does not prevent every injury. Nothing does. But evidence suggests motorcycle airbags can reduce injury severity in certain impact scenarios, especially to covered upper body areas. The cost sits between $400 and $900 for a quality system, with solid mid-range options available around $500 to $600. That sounds like a lot until you price a single hospital stay, a single surgery, or a single season off the bike. A motorcycle airbag can cost far less than many crash-related medical bills or months off the bike. You are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized. A vest that deploys in under 25 milliseconds costs less than 1 night in a trauma ward. That math is not complicated. And the number one adaptation, the one that costs nothing, requires no new gear, no new bike, and no trip to a dealer. The one almost nobody does. Your body is the machine that operates the machine. Everything else on this list, the bike, the bars, the suspension, the ABS, the vest, all of it compensates for a body that is declining. This one actually slows the decline, and the difference between a rider who works on this and one who doesn't is not marginal. It can make a major difference in how long and how confidently you keep riding. Here is what matters most and why. Core strength. First, your core is what keeps you stable on the bike at low speeds, through slow maneuvers, and at stops. A weak core can make low-speed control and balance harder, especially on a heavy bike. Planks, dead bugs, bird dogs. You do not need a gym. Even short strength sessions, several times a week, can make a real difference. Balance next. Single leg stands, a balance board if you have one. These directly translate to the moments that catch older riders off guard, the slow speed tip, the foot down instability, the parking lot that suddenly becomes a crisis. Balance is trainable at any age. Most riders just never train it. Neck mobility. This one is specific and almost never mentioned. Shoulder checks and intersection scanning depend heavily on neck mobility, and that range of motion is exactly what arthritis, stiffness, and long-term posture habits can reduce. Regular neck mobility work may improve or preserve the range of motion you need. That shoulder check you didn't quite complete because turning your head that far was uncomfortable. That is where accidents come from. Flexibility. Last, yoga, stretching, whatever you'll actually do consistently. Stiff hips and tight hamstrings make mounting and dismounting harder, affect your riding posture, and accelerate fatigue. Now here is the honest part. You already know you should be doing this. Many riders over 60 who are still on two wheels know their body has changed. The ones who are still riding at 75 are not the ones who had the best genetics. They are the ones who treated staying on the bike as a reason to take care of themselves off it. The bike doesn't keep you riding, you do. Most riders over 60 are still on the same bike, in the same position, with the same habits they had at 45, and most of them will not change anything until something forces them to. That is the pattern. That is what the injury numbers reflect. You now know what is actually changing in your body and exactly what to do about it. The bike that fits, the position that does not exhaust you, the suspension that works for you, the hardware that compensates for what biology takes, the gear that loads correctly, the vest that deploys before you can react, the body you maintain off the bike so it performs on it. The riders who make it to 75, 80, still covering miles, still in control, did not get lucky. They adapted. Every single one of them. Adaptation is not surrender. It is how you stay on two wheels for the next decade. This is part of a series on riding smart past 60. Next up, the bikes. Which ones actually make sense after 60? The weight, the ergonomics, the seat height, all of it. Subscribe so you do not miss it.